basically, I'm in a public relations and communications role. I always have been. And, just taking a step back for a second, I didn't even know, as you mentioned, I didn't even know what PR was in college. I never took a PR class. I was really focused on learning the broader sport management functions, which, and all of a sudden one day I had, an opportunity to be a PR intern with the New York City Triathlon and Ironman up in Manhattan, where I am now. And, the next thing I know is I fell in love with PR, and I was like, oh, I think I could be pretty good at this. And I basically pursued that role, or that avenue, I should say. And that led me to being on the agency side of things in a PR function. So basically, in an agency setting, we're sort of serving, we have two purposes amongst many, but our main, we serve our clients. We're a client service business, and we also deal with a lot of media. Typically, and it's funny because my parents still, they don't quite understand. They think they understand what I do, but sometimes they just don't get it. And the way I explain it to them is, any story you read, let's say in the New York Times or the Wall Street Journal, or if you're reading something, in Sports Business Journal or The Verge or any of these outlets across, all these different verticals, typically they're placed, by a publicist or a strategic communicator, something like that. So a brand, a product, a league, a team, a property, those are all clients of ours. And, they look to us for strategic communications advice, which that means how do we get them in the news? I like to consider myself and DKC, we're newsmakers, we're newsjackers. How do we insert our clients into the conversation and really build buzz and amplify awareness? And I know I'm throwing a lot of buzzwords at you guys, but that's just sort of how that's really what we do. So yeah, it's fun. It's interesting. It definitely keeps you on your toes, but yeah, I like to think of, myself as somebody that creates the news. Definitely. I think, one of the big projects that I was really proud of, I mean, amongst many, and I can go on, but, we were working with the Golden State Warriors, and, they were opening their new home Chase Center out in San Francisco. They opened it in this past October, 2019. But, the whole year leading up to it, we were basically tasked with getting, international press for Chase Center. I mean, if you look at the Golden State Warriors and you break it down, you would think that they could get any media in the world, and they can. They have Steph Curry, Steve Kerr, they had, Kevin Durant at the time. So I think for us, what we were really tasked with was penetrating those foreign markets where they, wanted to, again, build that buzz around Chase Center and San Francisco, so that when foreigners would come and visit the US, and they would come to San Francisco, they would want to come to Chase Center. And it's not just for a basketball game to see the Warriors, it's for a concert or a family fun event. Like they have so many different events going on every day. So that was really interesting. We were able to penetrate over 6 countries, from Australia to Mexico, to the UK. I mean, basically there was a lot of moving pieces. And, it's funny because international media relations, there's always for countries like the UK and Australia, there's no language barrier, but for other countries there are. So you have to sort of take that into consideration when talking with these media. And really, for us, I mean, it was just really about finding the right folks to cover, the opening of Chase Center and really building out. We had no access to, any of the players. We were basically, we helped position Rick Welts, who's a globally known, thought leader in the sports world. He's the president of the Golden State Warriors currently. So he was our spokesperson for everything, and he's wonderful. He's so amazing. But yeah, it was really interesting because the challenge for us was really, how do we take a brand like the Golden State Warriors and position them overseas? you know, because especially, you know, last year, towards the end of last year, you know, when, you know, Curry got hurt and KD was no longer, then they start talking about, oh, well, what's going to happen? And, you know, it's all about how you position it with these reporters, and how you come across in terms of messaging. And I think it was really interesting. And when you look back on it, you know, it was a really cool project to be able to work on, and really help, you know, amplify that awareness again. You know, I mean, there's so many, I could probably talk forever about different projects, but I won't. But, you know, I think that was one that really stands out to me, and just something that I was able to own and manage. And I'm really proud of that work. When we basically, Delta has a fairly robust sports sponsorship portfolio, you know, where they, you know, they're the official airline of several different teams within the core four leagues, and also the MLS. So, you know, one of our tasks was really, you know, Mariano Rivera, legendary Yankee. Delta wanted to celebrate his Hall of Fame induction. And they basically came to us and they asked, you know, what can we do, and what would, you know, be buzzworthy and be PRable. And we came up with this idea, you know, from soup to nuts, to really help, you know, connect Delta to the consumer, which is what it's all about. You know, nobody better connects the world than Delta. So really that was what resonated, you know, within the whole event. And so what we ended up doing was we ended up dedicating gate 42 at JFK Airport here in New York City to Mariano. So it was really cool. I mean, it's funny because, you know, when you're planning an event, like, I like to think of myself as like part publicist, part strategist, part event planner, part, you know, counselor. Also, like, I play therapist all the time, like, just with everybody, but that's part of it, right? So you wear a ton of hats in PR, and I think it always keeps you on your toes, and you get to do really cool things. And I think, you know, if you Google, you know, after this call, if you Google like Mariano Rivera gate B42, it, like, you'll see that it went everywhere. And like, that was, you know, because of us, that's what we did. And we came up, you know, with the idea. And also, obviously, you know, we worked with a lot of other, you know, stakeholders involved, but, you know, it was a really cool thing to be a part of, and oversee, and be in the nitty gritty of it from start to finish. Yeah, I mean, it's funny you asked that, because we are still operating fairly normal. I mean, you know, a lot of media that, you know, if you look at the news cycle, media doesn't sleep. Granted, you know, the news cycle is 24/7, and there's a lot of COVID focused angles. I think what it's really about is, how do we insert our clients into those COVID angles? So what are our clients doing? You know, are they donating money? Did they reschedule their season? Are they, you know, are they talking about how they're working from home and what they're learning? You know, it's really, there's all these different opportunities. Like, you know, I don't know if you guys read Sports Business Journal's Unpacks newsletter every night. If you don't, I highly recommend you should. But, you know, we've gotten our clients in there several times just to talk about certain things going on, you know, different announcements. You know, I've been working with Gen G, the esports franchise, you know, and they recently did a couple things with different schools, including University of Pennsylvania and University of Kentucky. And, you know, it was really, I moved quickly with SBJ, but, you know, it was really like, let me reach out to the person I know there and see if this would be interesting for their Unpacks newsletter, because it's COVID related. It's how, you know, basically UPenn's iconic Penn relays went virtual. So that was really interesting. We were, you know, we had a part in that. But yeah, I think it's really, you know, the news cycle doesn't sleep. And for us, it's really about how we, you know, can insert our clients into that. You know, and then I think from a client perspective, you know, we're finding, you know, it's typical on like a client call, you say like, you know, hey, how are you? And it's like 2 seconds, right? In normal times. Now it's like 10 minutes. like, how's it going? Like, and it's really about like checking in and making sure people are okay, because, everybody's working from home now. You have kids in the background, you have, the amount of times I've been on a call where like a little kid pops up, or, you know what I mean? Or like a dog walks by, like, it's cute. And like, you just have to, like, it is what it is at this point. But yeah, I think it's really about just making sure, people are okay. And it's not just to say our clients, but also internally too, right? So like, mental health is super important, across the board, and around the whole world, as it should be. But yeah, I think, we're all just finding our way and navigating as best as we can in these, as everybody says, these uncharted waters. I think first and foremost, I mean, the PR industry has, shifted and evolved, over the last 7 years since I first started, and it continues to every day. I mean, 5, 6 years ago, nobody really, not nobody cared about influencers, but nobody really, like, what was an influencer, right? Like, what does that count as? Is that more PR? Is that social media? Like, what does that count? And now those lines have sort of been separated, but at the same time, they're still a bit blurred. So it's really, I think that's one thing to keep an eye on, is how social media progresses, and, how influencers are working with brands and things of that nature. I also think it's really important to keep an eye on, the media and what's going on there. Media is changing every day. I mean, 10, 15 years ago, print was king, and now it's online, it's digital, it's all of that. But I think it's really important just to have an understanding of the media landscape and how that works. And I think there are definitely some good resources to figure that out and help you navigate that. And I think, from the media landscape, like, when you read a newsletter like SBJ, one of my favorite newsletters is Front Office Sports. I highly can't recommend it enough. I work with them all the time. Adam, the founder, I've known him for years and years and years. But, and their whole staff is incredible. But I think, reading and being aware of things going on in the industry is really about how you can stay relevant. Because let's say you're talking and doing an informational interview with somebody from Pepsi, and it's like, you just saw Pepsi launch this new product, or they donated $5 million for COVID research or something like that. You can then bring that up, and it shows that you care, and it shows that you're staying in touch with everything going on. But I think, really, I mean, every morning I read, what do I read? Let's see, I read SBJ, their Morning Buzz. I read Front Office Sports. I read Axios Sports. I read Synopsis Sports. And then I also read Term Sheet and Snacks, which is one of the like stock market financial newsletters that like includes a bunch of nuggets, on just trading and stuff like that. Just because, there's oftentimes clients in there, or, potential clients in there, or former clients in there, things like that. So I like to stay on top of that. But yeah, I mean, I think, look, like, the industry and media and the way brands and properties and leagues and clients are operating changes on a daily basis. I mean, if you would have asked me 3 months ago, would we all be in this position right now? And I would have said, no way. Like, I was in Miami for Super Bowl in February. Then I went to LA in early March for an event, like, and now I haven't left my apartment in 8 weeks. So, it's just like, it's weird, because, we're so used to being go, go, go. And now we're on the sidelines. But, there will be a time when it all returns, just TBD when. Every agency is sort of set up a little bit differently in their approach to teams, but at the end of the day, it's all pretty similar. And I think that's one of the best parts about being at an agency, is you learn really quickly how to work in teams, because you have to, because clients and accounts are too big for you to handle it on your own for the most part. And that's one of the great things, because you get to learn from so many other people all the time. The way our teams are typically structured, and it's different for every client depending on their scope of work and, their needs and wants. But, we make sure to give each client the TLC that they deserve and that they want and need. So, you know, for example, you know, I'm on a client where, you know, it's myself, typically as a vice president and, you know, as an account supervisor, you are in a position to be able to run an account fully. And then, you know, you have staff under you who will help you, you know, and also, and everybody sort of takes their own sort of role in the account once you get into the swing of things. So, you know, in most agencies, an account coordinator is entry level. That's somebody, you know, who's fresh out of college, or somebody who, you know, is really looking to just gain experience in the PR world. And then typically, and again, this sort of varies between agencies, but typically, after account coordinator, you know, just moving up the ranks, you either become like a associate account executive, or you go right to an account executive, and then you go to a senior account executive, and then account supervisor, and then it kind of, you know, varies a little bit in between there. So you could go to senior account supervisor, and then account director, and then vice president, or in some cases you can go from account supervisor to vice president. It just, every agency is different in the way they do it. But I think, you know, typically our teams, and there's not one real clear answer just because every team is structured so differently. But, you know, like for our, you know, for different accounts, we might have, you know, 2 VPs on one account, and then like, you know, a senior account executive, an account executive, and account coordinator all together. So that's 5 people. And then, you know, on another account, it might just be 1 VP, 1 account supervisor, and then like 2 account executives. It really just kind of depends. But I think, you know, the best thing is that, you know, they're all obviously overseen by, you know, our EVPs, and our directors, you know, and really we, you know, it's great because you get to learn from them. They're still involved. And that's one of the best things, is that you still have access to those senior level folks. Yeah. So, that's a good question. I think, you know, for us, and, you know, I can use the Premier League example. So we, you know, the Premier League, we were working with them to help bring their Premier League mornings live, activations to the US. So we, were working with them in the DC, activation, the Boston activation, the New York City activation. And then, you know, so it's really, I mean, it's funny because, you know, that it's more of a, for those, rather than like a national approach, aside from New York City, where there's a ton of national media here, but for Boston and DC, you know, more specifically Boston, because DC also has some national media, but, you know, you want to take that, local and regional approach, because basically what the activations, it was a fan fest, a 2-day fan fest to watch, you know, a whole slew of games and come celebrate the Premier League and continue to, you know, be all, you know, be excited about the events and soccer fans and all that stuff. But, you know, I think for us, the biggest challenge was, you know, media is so different over in the UK, as I sort of touched on before. So it's really, you know, about managing expectations. And, you know, I think that's part of our job, is managing client expectations, managing media expectations, and really, you know, just making sure that, that, you know, we still do our jobs, right? So I think a big challenge, across any agency setting is, you know, is always working with, media. Granted, that's my favorite part about being a publicist and being a communicator, is working with media, because I love seeing my stories and our client stories come to life. And, you know, at the end of the day, like, it was because I pitched that person, or like, you know, whatever. But again, it's like, it's not like, as you know, my parents still say, why isn't your name on that, you know, in the paper? I'm like, no, that's not how it works. But I think, you know, it's really about, just managing expectations across the board. So I think doing PR for an individual is very, very different. You know, I think you're really going to be focused on the individual. I mean, you know, you want to get to know the individual. You want to be able to pick their brain. You want to be able to know how they think. And you also want to be able to, aside from just getting them in like a newspaper or on TV, I think one of the most important pieces of what we do is thought leadership. So you want to be able to position them, you know, at conferences, and, you know, and right now, like all these webinars and things like that, really as experts in their field, right? So it's like, and I think, dealing with, well, on the flip side, doing PR for businesses and organizations, they're both great. I love doing all of it. And I think that's what really, again, working at an agency, that's what's really special, because you get to do so many different things where, it's like, one day I could be, I could go into the office one day and like, I have a whole list of things I need to do. And then like something, comes up out of the blue and I'm like, oh, now I have to switch my entire day and I have to do this, and this. So I think, really doing something for, I think a person on a personal level, typically what we do is we like to position our clients that we, if we represent individual folks, we like to position them as thought leaders, as experts in their respective fields. And also, oftentimes, like, let's say you're working with like a COO of a basketball team, like they probably have other experience across other verticals. So, maybe they have an experience and passion for esports. Maybe they have an experience and passion for technology. Like, how do we get them in those beats too, so that they aren't, just seen as like the basketball COO? Like, we want to position them outside of that organization. Think for me, I've been really fortunate in being able to work with a lot of my clients that have really great things that they want to, build awareness about. And, while there's always going to be, things that are a little bit, more challenging than others, I think for the most part, I've been lucky enough to be able to, work with clients that honestly, that, it's like, they're newsworthy. And that's really what makes, my job, that's really what makes me love what I do, is I get to work with folks that I actually enjoy working with. I get to work with clients that I love working with. And, I think there's always, we obviously, I think from just a brand perspective and, just like the public perception of, different, campaigns that have gone wrong, something like, where you saw Kendall Jenner in the Super Bowl ad and Pepsi and all that stuff. Like, I think that really leads to, I think in general, there needs to be, and this is something I tend to harp on a little bit, just as a woman in sports and, the importance of diversity and inclusion in the sports world. But I think, to really avoid these kinds of things that aren't, so much, perceived well by the public, I think you really need to have a better understanding of diversifying who's at the table and, really including different schools of thought in everything that you do. From a crisis perspective, you kind of mentioned, but, every crisis is different. And it really, you have to, I think first and foremost, when a crisis approaches, you really need to take a step back first and understand your client. I think that's the most important part, is really understanding, what actually happened. What are there any protocols for clients that are going on that we need to be aware of? Does a client typically, is it against, brand protocol to make a statement, or do we just kind of like let it go? So that's, I think that's sort of the first step. But oftentimes, I think depending on the crisis situation, we deal with crises that really need to, that are, reactive and proactive. And sometimes they're a mix of both. So it really just depends. But, I think it's a little bit, it's challenging because, for us and for myself, like my crisis experience is really, dealing with a little bit of, it's mainly reactive PR. So it's preparing statements, making sure we're all buttoned up just in case, something were to happen. And, but then there is that proactive PR, and, you take a step and you deal with it, and you deal with it strategically and smartly. And, I think the biggest thing in a crisis is to not panic. That's really what's most important, because, if you come off as panicking, your client is going to panic. So you need to be that rational voice, and that calming voice for a client, especially in a crisis situation. Even if you didn't know about the crisis. I mean, the amount of times I've just been looped into a crisis and I'm like, oh, okay, here we go. And that's just sort of what it is. That's just sort of a part of the PR world and being, and, you know, working in an agency, and also, you know, teams and leagues and everybody, they deal with crises all the time. So it's really, I think that the first thing is really understanding what the crisis is about and who it involves, and then going from there. And, you know, whether that's consulting with your client, you know, and figuring out best next steps. But I think every crisis is going to be completely different in the way it's approached.
Thank you.
I think you have to be a personable person. I think you have to have that energy and that excitement for what you do. You know, and for me, like I can talk to a fly on a wall for 5 hours and be totally fine. You know, and I think really you have to just come across and be passionate about what you do. You know, I didn't know I wanted to do PR. You know, when I was in college, I didn't even know what PR was. Like, what do you mean you get a TV hit? Like, I didn't even know what that means or what that meant. But, you know, I think once I sort of got my feet wet, I understood what the role entailed, and I was excited about it. I was excited to be able to deal with media. I still am. And I think there's no better feeling, you know, of seeing a story that you've placed and it running and it being a good story, and the client is super happy, and like you get that butterfly effect. It still happens to me 7 years later. I think it's going to always happen to me. I mean, I still remember my first like New York Times hit on the cover, on the sports page cover. Like, I mean, it was literally last year, but you know, I mean, it's laminated in my apartment. Like, it was just something that was so monumental for me, and like something I've been wanting to, you know, not cross off my list, but cross off my list in hopes that there will be plenty more down the line. But, you know, I think really it's about being personable, being caring, and understanding what the industry is all about. You know, a lot of people confuse PR with digital content and social media and all that kind of stuff. And I think, you know, from a PR perspective, like, yes, that's all involved. And, you know, you all, like, depending on your clients and, you know, or where you're working, if you're in house, like, you work oftentimes with you know, between teams and cross-functional, you know, you're at a cross-functional agency, like, you know, DKC, we have a social team, we have an events team, we have a data and analytics team. We work all the time with them. But I really think from a PR perspective, I think that the thing for me, at least, and I think what sets, you know, people that I work with apart and what sets me apart is the energy. I think, you know, to be in PR, you have to have that drive and that want, to be able to deal with clients, to be able to deal with internal stakeholders, external stakeholders, media. I mean, I'll tell you, PR it's not easy. You know, a lot of the times our job relies on third parties, you know, a reporter or an editor, a news anchor or something like that. And oftentimes, you know, you get the blame if something goes wrong, and even if it wasn't in your control. And I think, you know, that's the biggest thing. I think you have to be able to keep a cool, if you're gonna panic, and everybody panics, it's okay, but keep a cool panic and a cool calm, because that's really what will set you apart. And, you know, you understand, you know, you have to rationalize things and take a deep breath, and just, you know, I think there's a lot of different skills that will really set somebody apart in the PR world. And like, again, you know you're good at your job when you get that butterfly feeling of like, yes, this just happened. I'm so happy to have been involved in it. Like, you know, the feeling that I had after, you know, the Mariano Rivera, you know, dedication, or after working with, you know, Chase Center for a year. I mean, I was just like, how do I go up from here? Like, that was just, it was incredible. And I think just that excitement that you're able to have, you know, every day coming to the office or to my computer, now that I'm working from home, I think that's really important. And, you know, and knowing that, you know, what you want to do. Yeah. So I actually have never worked in-house, but I have tons of friends who work in-house. My brother works in-house. So I definitely have like a good inkling of what goes on there. So I think from an agency perspective, you know, you're on probably, and this depends on the agency, but you can be on anywhere from 3 to 8, 9, 10 accounts, just depending on the time of year, how things ebb and flow with business. You know, so you're touching bits and pieces of different business every single day, where, you know, in-house, you're focused on one team, one organization, one brand, one property. And of course, there might be different things that go on within that one facet of the organization, but at the same time, it's very different than being at an agency. Me personally, and I've heard this from a number of folks just who, you know, in and around the agency world and in-house and stuff, but I think, you know, going into an agency first is definitely very beneficial. Just because you will understand how to prioritize, how to, you know, manage your time just with different clients, you know, and really just understand, you know, how different, you know, facets of the business work. Every client has different goals and wants and, you know, KPIs, which are key performance indicators, you know, but it's different when you're in-house and you're more, you know, you're more around that internal banter that goes on, you know, that kind of stuff. So I think really being at an agency, you know, has really opened my eyes to a lot of different, you know, companies, how they're run, how their executives are positioned. You know, they're really, I mean, I don't think there's anything better than learning at an agency. You're going to learn the amount you learn at an agency every day. I mean, is unbelievable. And also who you learn from at an agency is incredible. And, you know, the same could be said for in-house. There's brilliant people in our industry, as I'm sure you all know, that have, you know, completely transformed their league or team or what have you. And I think it's important to, you know, and honestly, I really think that, you know, being in-house and being at an agency, you could go either way. And I think for me, the biggest thing is to tell people that there are these routes at an agency where people might not know about. You know, I think in-house, if you think about it, think about the NFL. There's 32 teams. There's probably 3 or 4 staff on each communication staff on each team. So that's, you know, 150 staff in the whole nation. I mean, what are the odds of that, of getting a job in there as a coordinator, no less, as an entry level position where, you know, it's amazing. And I'm sure there, you know, there's people that do it all the time and that's amazing, but being at an agency will also expose you to all these different opportunities to be able to go in-house, you know, if you want to at a later date, to be able to go in-house at a brand or at a property or at a venue, and it'll expose at a network. Like, you know, people ask, you know, when I chat with students, people ask me, they're like, where do you think I should apply aside from teams? And I'm like, let me tell you, because there's so many avenues and opportunities. I mean, you know, you look at a portfolio like Pepsi, or you look at a portfolio like Anheuser-Busch, or, you know, they're all Delta, they're all involved in sports. So how do you get involved that way? And there's so many different ways to do it, whether through an agency or through in-house. Yeah, I mean, I think, you know, it's all about strategy, right? So I think we would have to get a really good understanding of, you know, the brand or whoever it might be, you know, what the goals are, and really just come up with a creative strategic process for them. And again, it's very, every client is very different in how we approach it. But I think it really just depends on, you know, what they're hoping to get out of it and how we can best help them and serve them, being their counsel, you know, and being strategists for them. So I think it's really just about, you know, just coming up with that proper process and strategy for a client if they, you know, want to shift their brand, you know, or if they want to go from, you know, if they have like a negative perception, how do we turn that into a positive? We do that all the time. You know, the conferences, which again sort of ties back into the thought leadership aspect of it. I think that's a really great place. The only thing that I think, you know, I caution everybody with is you have to be willing to just go up to people and network. That's the biggest thing. You can't be afraid. I mean, I'll tell you, you know, I think one of the most valuable conferences I went to last year was SBJ's Game Changers conference, which was, you know, it's their woman focused conference. But I was there and I literally, you know, at every networking break, I was going up to random people saying, hi, I'm Tamarah. What do you do? Let's chat for 2 minutes. And then you move to the next. It's like speed dating in a way, right? It's like you need to just keep meeting people. And then, you know, I think the biggest thing too, and right now even, just because there are no, person-to-person conferences going on right now, but there are a lot of virtual conferences. And I will say, so, I mean, Sport Techie had their virtual conference a couple weeks ago. I think it was like end of March, but it was during when this was all starting and we were working from home, but I signed up for it. It was free. It's usually not free. And they had this really cool networking chat room. So you could actually just start chatting with everybody, that they, or whoever you wanted to, like they gave you the list of people and you could just start chatting. I think I met like, I networked with like 6 or 8 people there, and I still keep in touch with them. And at the end of the day, it's like, you're in a chat room, so you don't want to take up too much of their time, but like ask for their email and then like, let's connect with them offline. How do you take it to the next level? But yeah, I mean, I definitely think conferences are a good way. I also think like, don't be afraid to ask people for help. If there's somebody you want to talk to, I still do it. If there's somebody, you want to network with, I mean, if somebody knows somebody that knows somebody, or if somebody has worked here, like say like, hey, do you think this person might be up for an informational interview? Like, I think the biggest hump to get over for any, college student or somebody that's just starting out in the industry is really just knowing that it's okay to do this and have these informational interviews. I mean, I was speaking, I did another speaker series last week, and I got probably, there were like 100+ people on the Zoom call. I probably got like 25 emails, and I'm talking to every single person. So people are willing to talk to you. And I think when you talk to them and you have that conversation, just come prepared and give them and show them that you care, show them you did your homework, and show them that you want to learn from them. And I think the biggest thing in these informational interviews is make it non-transactional. Don't ask for a job. That's not, like right now, like if somebody were to say like, hey, let's get on a call, I want to learn more about you. And then they say, oh, by the way, I saw this job, like, and that's happened to me before. They told me, I saw this job, like, can you put in a good word for me? I'm like, if you would have just had the conversation and then 2 days later, you could have said, thanks so much for chatting with me. I also saw this job. Let me know. I'd love to like learn more about it or something. You know what I mean? Like, it's like, make it non-transactional. And also I think the biggest thing is, staying in touch. And I think you have to just figure out a way to stay in touch. And I think one of the best ways to do that, and I'm lucky that it falls into my industry, that it's because it's related to news, but I think keep up with people that you've talked to. So if you're talking to somebody at, if you're talking, let's say you're talking to me and one of my clients, I worked on the Premier League. So, it's send me, if you see some news about the Premier League doing a fan fest in the US, send me a note, say, oh, this looks awesome. Are you involved? That's it. That's all it is. It just keeps that momentum going, and it keeps that non-transactional, relationship and building. And then at the end of the day, like, for me and, for everybody in the industry, like, when hiring is, when people are hiring, like, we're looking for smart people. We're looking for people that care. And I think, if you develop that rapport over time with somebody, then you could be top of mind when a position's open. Like I sort of mentioned, every client team is set up a little bit differently, but, I think it's really important to, in my level and my role, like, I manage people, and I think it's really important to manage people, but also, and appropriately, but also understand that nobody is going to be like you. And, you can have very high expectations, and there are very high expectations, firm wide, for myself, for my colleagues, and I think it's really about communicating with each other and understanding what everybody is doing, having those weekly check-ins, having those, internal daily calls, or, calls now because we're working from home. But like, and if we were in the office, like, I would just pop over to my colleague and say, like, tell me what's going on here. Or he or she would come over to me and say, hey, I just did this and this. Let's talk about it. I have a question. So it's really about that internal communication process, because, you want to build that strong team, but you also, rather than, you want to manage, and you're going to manage appropriately, but you don't want to micromanage, and you don't want to not trust your colleagues, because then, that won't instill confidence in them. And I think the biggest thing is really about instilling confidence and trusting people to do their job. And, everybody on different account teams typically takes a specific role. Some, like an account coordinator, for example, might be tasked with sending news relevant to the client every single day. So let them own that. and, take pride in that, while, an account executive might be drafting a pitch and sending that to us for review. So let them own that. And, then when the pitch is done, to go to media, let them pitch it and let them take ownership in that. And then, let us come in and help where you need it. Right. And I think even for me, like, that's been the biggest challenge, because I love to like take ownership on all these little things. And for me, media relations is like one of my favorite parts of working in PR. But, as I continue to grow in my career, I become more of a strategist. So that's sort of the transition that I've made, as, providing more strategic counsel, working with clients more, where, I let sort of my colleagues that are a bit junior sort of take the reins on the media relations, in that sense.